My name is Julian Vance, and for as long as I could remember, that name meant something in the halls of Sterling Cormac. It meant integrity. It meant vision. It meant my father, Arthur Vance. His portrait hangs in the main boardroom, a quiet, oil-painted sentinel with eyes that seem to follow you, judging the firm's every move against the high watermark he set. He was more than a partner. He was the architect of the modern firm, the man who navigated it through the choppy waters of the late 20th century and made it the titan it was. Or the titan I thought it was. I work there now, a managing director in the mergers and acquisitions division. I earned my spot, clawed my way up through long nights and brutal, unforgiving deals. But I was always aware of the shadow I worked in, the Vance shadow. It opened doors, but it also meant the expectations were stratospheric. I spent my entire career trying to live up to the man in that portrait. What I just discovered is that the portrait, the legacy, the very survival of Sterling Cormac, was all propped up by a single colossal lie. A lie my father told 30 years ago. The discovery didn't come in a dramatic flash of insight. It was a slow, creeping dread, a series of whispers in the data that didn't add up. It started with a portfolio review for a potential new capital raise. We were looking to expand our footprint in Southeast Asia, and I was leading the due diligence on our own books. Deep in the appendices of our international holdings, I found it, an anomaly. A subsidiary listed as SC Bahari, based in a small geopolitically unstable island nation that had recently undergone a regime change. Its stated asset value was enormous, a 9-figure number that served as a critical piece of the firm's collateral base, but its returns were flat, perfectly, impossibly flat. For 30 years it had neither gained nor lost a single significant dollar. It was a financial black hole, a place where money went in but no real activity ever came out. I pulled the incorporation papers. They were flimsy, ghost-like. The listed directors were shell corporations. The address was a post office box that had been defunct for a decade. The more I dug, the colder the trail became, until it wasn't a trail at all. It was a wall. A carefully constructed fiction. SC Bahari wasn't a foreign subsidiary. It was a toxic asset, a catastrophic loss from a disastrous derivatives play in the early 90s, bundled up, given a fake name, and parked off-balance sheet, where regulators and auditors would never look too closely, assuming it was just another one of Arthur Vance's brilliant esoteric ventures. The international markets are shifting now, with new transparency laws and a global push against the kind of opaque financial havens that allowed SC Bahari to exist. The new regime on that island nation was demanding proof of physical operations, something Sterling Cormac could not provide. The asset, this phantom limb of the firm, was about to be exposed. And when it was, the write-down wouldn't just be painful, it would be a death blow. The 9-figure hole would trigger our debt covenants, prompt a run on our capital, and bankrupt the firm within a week. The hum of the HVAC system in the boardroom felt like a countdown timer. I was standing before Marcus Thorne and Lawrence Reed, the 2 remaining senior partners who had come up under my father. They were men whose entire careers, their multi-million-dollar homes and their comfortable lives were built on the foundation my father had laid. They owed everything to him. Marcus, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes, gestured vaguely towards my father's portrait. He said, his voice a low, conspiratorial purr, "Julian, your father was a pragmatist. He understood that to build something great, sometimes you have to make difficult choices. He did what was necessary to save the firm then, so it could thrive for the next 30 years. For us, for you." Lawrence, a heavier man whose face was perpetually flushed with either expensive wine or chronic stress, nodded in agreement. He leaned forward, his palms flat on the polished mahogany table. "The market is jittery. If this situation becomes public, it's all over. Decades of work, thousands of jobs, gone. We can't let that happen. We have a plan to roll the asset into a new, larger fund, bury it even deeper. But we need fresh capital to make it work. We need to look strong, stable." Then came the knife. Marcus looked from me to the portrait and back again. "The Vance name is the gold standard. Your reputation is spotless. You will lead the capital-raising roadshow. Your credibility, your lineage, it's our single greatest asset right now. It's your duty, Julian. Your duty to your father's legacy, to protect what he built." They had me. They thought they had me perfectly cornered between 2 impossible choices. On one side, my father's legacy, this gilded, revered image of a financial genius. On the other, my own career, my future, which was inextricably tied to the survival of the firm. They were asking me to become a part of the lie, to use the trust I had painstakingly built to perpetuate a 30-year-old fraud. They wanted me to look investors in the eye and sell them on a company that I knew was a house of cards. They saw me not as a partner, not as a professional, but as a tool, a shield, the son who could be leveraged just as the father had leveraged his own name. They smiled, confident in their trap. They saw me as the dutiful son, the company man. They didn't understand. They looked at that portrait and saw a legend to be exploited. I looked at it and saw a man who, for reasons I was only just beginning to grasp, had made a terrible compromise. They thought my legacy was pre-written, a continuation of his. But they were about to learn that my legacy wasn't going to be about hiding the truth one last time. My legacy was going to be telling it. The silence in that boardroom stretched, thick and heavy with unspoken threats. The air conditioning kicked on again, a low mechanical sigh that seemed to mock the gravity of the moment. I looked from Marcus's predatory smile to Lawrence's sweaty, pleading face. They weren't just partners, they were relics. Men who had been riding my father's coattails for so long they'd forgotten how to walk on their own. They had been his lieutenants, and when the king died, they'd simply kept the throne warm, enjoying the privileges without ever bearing the true weight of the crown. They didn't innovate, they maintained. They didn't lead, they presided. And now the foundations of their comfortable kingdom were cracking, and they were turning to the prince to patch the walls with his own credibility. I finally broke the silence. My voice was calmer than I felt, a detached, almost clinical tone that seemed to unnerve them more than shouting would have. I said, "I understand the situation." Just that. 4 words. I didn't agree. I didn't refuse. I simply acknowledged the abyss they had shown me. Marcus's smile tightened. He had expected a fight, or at least a negotiation. My composure was a variable he hadn't accounted for. He thought he was playing chess, but he couldn't see the board I was looking at. He saw a binary choice, complicity or ruin. I was beginning to see a third path. I walked out of that boardroom feeling strangely disconnected from my own body. My footsteps on the marble floor of the executive wing echoed, each one a sharp report in the tomb-like silence. I passed my assistant's desk. She gave me a concerned look, but I just gave a slight nod and kept walking. I didn't go back to my office. I went straight to the elevator, down 60 floors and out into the chaotic symphony of a New York afternoon. The humid air hit me like a physical blow. For a few minutes, I just stood there on the sidewalk, letting the river of people flow around me, a rock in the stream. I felt the vibration of the subway under my feet, a deep guttural rumble. The city felt real, solid, a stark contrast to the phantom numbers and polite fictions I'd just left behind in the sky. The walk home was a blur. I don't remember the route I took, but I ended up standing in front of my brownstone in the West Village. Inside, the silence was a different kind. It wasn't the sterile silence of the office. It was a heavy personal silence, filled with the ghosts of my own life. I bypassed the kitchen and went straight to the study. It was my sanctuary, lined with books on economic history, biographies of industrial titans, and in a small, unassuming frame on my desk, a picture of me and my father on a fishing boat. I was maybe 10 years old, grinning, holding up a small, pathetic-looking fish. He was looking at me, not the camera, with a rare, unguarded smile. I poured myself a scotch. Not just any scotch. A 25-year-old single malt from a distillery that had gone out of business a decade ago. It was a bottle my father had given me when I made vice president. He'd told me, only drink this for a victory, or a funeral. I wasn't sure which one this was. The peaty smoke of the liquor filled my senses, a familiar comfort. But it did nothing to calm the storm in my mind. The betrayal wasn't just that Marcus and Lawrence were trying to blackmail me. The real, gut-wrenching betrayal was the blow to my father's memory. Arthur Vance, my pole star, the man who had lectured me endlessly on the inviolable sanctity of one's word, had built his masterpiece on a foundation of sand. Competence isn't cheap, he used to say. But integrity is priceless. Had he been a hypocrite all along? I sat down at my terminal, the one I used for personal research, and logged into the firm's deep archives. As a managing director and his son, I had legacy access permissions that even Marcus and Lawrence probably didn't know existed. I wasn't just looking for data anymore. I was looking for a ghost. I was looking for my father's ghost in the machine. I started pulling the logs from 30 years ago, from the quarter when SC Bahari was created. It was the fall of 1993. The markets had been savaged by a bond crisis. I found the original file. Project Chimera, the name itself was a warning. A creature of myth, made of disparate, ill-fitting parts. The deeper I went, the more the story began to change. I found encrypted memo fragments, accessible only by a key that I recognized as my mother's birthday. My father had left a trail, not a confession, but a breadcrumb path of context, meant for someone who knew how to look. It was a digital diary of a man in hell. He hadn't made the disastrous derivatives trade. A younger, reckless partner had, a man named Alistair Finch, who had quietly resigned for health reasons a month later. The loss was so catastrophic, it would have triggered a total collapse. My father was faced with an impossible choice. Declare bankruptcy, wiping out not just the partners but every employee, every pension, every small-time investor who had trusted him. Or hide it. He chose to hide it. He created Project Chimera as a temporary fix, a financial firewall to buy the firm time to earn its way back to solvency. His notes were clear. It was meant to be unwound within 5 years. But then I saw the other part of the story. I saw the minutes from board meetings in the years that followed. I saw Marcus Thorne and Lawrence Reed, younger then, arguing forcefully against unwinding the position. They argued that the asset, as they began to call it, provided a stable, if fictional, collateral base that allowed the firm to take on more leverage, to grow faster. Why undo something that was working so well? My father's notes grew more frantic. He wrote of being outvoted, of being trapped by the very monster he had created. The temporary fix had become a permanent addiction. Marcus and Lawrence had gotten a taste of growth without risk, and they refused to give it up. My father, the legend, had spent the last decade of his life as a prisoner of his own firm, forced to maintain the lie he had created to save it. He hadn't been a hypocrite. He had been a man who made a deal with the devil and spent the rest of his life paying the price. A cold clarity washed over me, pushing aside the grief and anger. The knot in my stomach didn't disappear, but it hardened from a tangle of confusion into a solid ball of resolve. This wasn't just about a toxic asset anymore. It was about correcting a 30-year-old wrong. It was about freeing my father from the prison Marcus and Lawrence had kept him in, even after his death. They weren't protecting his legacy. They were defiling it. They had turned his desperate, flawed act of protection into a tool for their own enrichment. They were the parasites, living off a wound they had refused to let heal. Just then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but the area code was one I recognized from my father's old address book. I hesitated, then answered. "Julian, it's David Chen." The name hit me like a lightning strike. David Chen. My father's first partner, the yin to his yang. David was the cautious, meticulous accountant. My father was the visionary. They had built the firm together from a 2-room office. David had retired almost 15 years ago, cashing out after a bitter public falling out with Marcus and Lawrence over the firm's new strategic direction. No one knew the real reason. His voice was older, thinner than I remembered, but it still had the same razor-sharp precision. "I apologize for the late hour. I have a feeling you had a difficult day." "David," I said, my voice hoarse. "How did you know?" There was a dry chuckle on the other end of the line. "Because Marcus and Lawrence are fools, but they are predictable fools. They are running out of road, and the only card they have left to play is the Vance name. Let me guess. They mentioned your duty, your father's legacy?" Word for word, I confirmed, a sense of relief washing over me. I wasn't alone in this. "Arthur was my friend," David said, his voice losing its cynical edge and taking on a tone of deep, resonant sadness. "For 40 years. Towards the end, he was trapped. He told me about Chimera. Not all the details, but enough. He was trying to find a way to unwind it without them, but his health failed before he could. He always said, 'The structure must be sound. David, the foundation has to be pure.' Those two, they don't care about the structure. They just like the view from the top floor." He paused, and I could hear him take a slow breath. "He made a mistake, Julian. A terrible human mistake, born of a desire to protect his people. But what Marcus and Lawrence have done with it since, that is not a mistake. That is a sin. They've been draining the firm's true profits for years to prop up their own bonuses, using Chimera's fictitious value as collateral for their own side ventures. It's not just a lie anymore. It's an active, parasitic fraud. That was the final piece. The catalyst. It wasn't just about covering up an old loss. It was an ongoing crime. My resolve solidified, no longer a liquid emotion, but something hard and crystalline. This was no longer a defensive action. This was going to be a reclamation. I was going to tear down the rotten structure, yes, but I was going to do it in a way that saved the foundation. I would expose the lie, but I would also expose the liars. I would honor my father not by perpetuating his mistake, but by finishing the work he had started, cleaning his own house. David, I said, my voice steady and clear, I'm going to need your help. They think they've cornered me. They think this is about my father's legacy versus my career. I looked at the photograph on my desk, at the man smiling at his son, but I'm about to show them that my legacy will be telling the truth. The conversation with David Chen was the spark that lit the fuse. His confirmation of my suspicions, the addition of his own insights into the rot at the core of the firm, transformed my shock into a cold, precise anger. It was no longer a question of if I would act, but how. A simple leak to the press or a regulator would be easy. It would be righteous. It would also be a firestorm, burning the guilty and the innocent alike. It would destroy the pensions of the very people my father had tried to protect, men and women who had worked at Sterling Cormack for decades, the lifers in accounting, in IT, in administrative support. It would vaporize the portfolios of clients who had placed their trust not in Marcus and Lawrence but in the institution my father had built. That wasn't justice. It was just destruction. My father's mistake was a contained blast. A public reveal now would be a dirty bomb. No, the plan had to be surgical. It had to be a controlled demolition. I needed to isolate the cancer, Project Chimera, Marcus and Lawrence, and excise it from the healthy tissue of the firm before the whole body died. And for that I needed more than just the truth. I needed leverage, allies, and a deep, structural understanding of the very systems they were using to maintain their lie. Legacy is what you build, not what you inherit. I was about to start construction. My first call after hanging up with David was to a young woman named Maria Sanchez. Maria was a senior analyst in our forensic accounting division. She was brilliant, a bulldog with spreadsheets, and fiercely loyal. I had found her 4 years ago, buried in a back-office role, and had seen the spark. I'd mentored her, pushed her, and advocated for her promotion when others dismissed her as too aggressive. Her loyalty was to me, not to the firm. She owed her career to my judgment, not to the partner's patronage. I called her on her personal cell. It was well past midnight. She answered on the second ring, her voice alert. Julian, Maria, I need your help, and I need absolute discretion. This conversation does not happen. We are not talking. Understood. There was a beat of silence. Understood, she said, her tone shifting from surprise to focus. Maria was a professional. She knew what a call like this meant. I need a complete real-time workup of the firm's liquid assets and short-term liabilities. Everything. I want to know our daily cash burn, our exact exposure to our primary lenders, and every cent of compensation and bonus paid to Thorne and Reed for the past 10 years. And I need you to find any outflows that have been collateralized against our offshore holdings, specifically SC Bahari. She didn't ask why. She didn't question the authority. She just said, it will be difficult to get that without raising flags. Their financials are firewalled. I know, I said. That's why I'm calling you. Be a ghost. Use back-channel queries. Pull the data in fragments from different servers. I don't care how you do it, as long as it's untraceable. This is not an official request. This is me asking you. I'll get it, she said, the determination clear in her voice. Give me 48 hours. Maria was my eyes and ears inside the machine. She was my first recruit, my insider. My second step was to build the weapon, and the weapon wasn't the information about the fraud itself. The fraud was just the detonator. The real weapon was the solution. I spent the next 2 days, fueled by coffee and the lingering taste of that expensive scotch, locked in my study. I wasn't just a manager. My background was in corporate restructuring. I knew how to take companies apart and put them back together. I began to model a new version of Sterling Cormac, a version without chimera. I started by building a virtual wall. On one side, I put Marcus, Lawrence, and the entirety of the SC Bahari Phantom asset. On the other side, I put everything else: the profitable divisions, the key client relationships, the physical assets, and most importantly, the people. I ran the numbers. Without the chimera liability, the core firm was not just viable. It was lean, profitable, and highly attractive. It was smaller, yes, but it was real. It was a business with a solid foundation. Exactly what my father had always preached. The lie had forced the firm to carry dead weight, to become bloated and inefficient to hide the hole at its center. This new version, let's call it Sterling 2.0, was a fortress. This became my secret plan. I wouldn't just expose the fraud. I would present a fully formed, legally sound, financially modeled alternative. I was pre-packaging the solution. This was crucial. Simply pointing out a problem makes you a whistleblower, a pariah. Arriving with a viable, profitable solution makes you a leader. It changes the entire narrative from one of destruction to one of rebirth. During this time, David Chen became my consigliere. We spoke every night. He had the institutional memory I lacked. He knew where all the bodies were buried because he'd helped dig some of the graves, the clean ones, at least. He remembered the handshake deals, the old loyalties, the quiet rivalries. You can't go to the board, he warned me one night. Half of them are cronies of Marcus and Lawrence, and the other half are too cowardly to act. They'll just circle the wagons and fire you to silence the problem. I'm not going to the board, I told him. I'm going over them. I'm going to find a buyer. David was silent for a moment. An outside buyer. You'd be selling the firm out from under them. I'd be selling the clean firm. I corrected him. I'm not selling the lie. I'm selling the truth. I'm going to find an investor who wants to buy a healthy, profitable investment bank at a discount, with the condition that the existing senior partners and their toxic baggage are jettisoned as part of the deal. This was the core of the strategy. A hostile takeover from within. I wouldn't be the destroyer of Sterling Cormac. I would be its savior, by selling its healthy body to a new owner and leaving Marcus and Lawrence holding the cancerous limb. David was impressed. It's bold. It's Arthur-level bold. But who would be brave enough to take on that kind of complex, messy deal? I already had a name in mind. A name that made David whistle softly through his teeth. The Al Thani Sovereign Wealth Fund. They were a global behemoth, known for their aggressive, strategic acquisitions, and for their distaste for the old boys club of Wall Street. Sterling Cormac had been trying to court them for years, with Marcus and Lawrence fawning over them to no avail. The fund was known for its forensic due diligence. They had likely sensed the weakness, the smell of something not quite right, and kept their distance. But I wouldn't be approaching them as a representative of Sterling Cormac. I would be approaching them as Julian Vance. My name, the very thing Marcus wanted to use as a shield for his lie, was about to become a key. It would get me in the door. And my plan, Sterling 2.0, would keep me in the room. As I was refining the financial models, Maria delivered. A series of encrypted files landed in a dead-drop cloud account. The data was everything I'd asked for, and more. It was a portrait of breathtaking greed. Marcus and Lawrence had been using the inflated collateral base from Project Chimera to secure personal loans and guarantees for their own disastrous side deals in speculative real estate and volatile tech startups. They weren't just covering up a 30-year-old mistake. They were actively looting the firm, siphoning its strength to fund their own gambling, all while preaching austerity to their employees. This was the hidden leverage. This was the accelerant. The original lie was a tragedy. This was a crime. The final piece of the plan fell into place. I couldn't just rely on an outside buyer. I needed to control the firm's most valuable assets, the ones that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet, the talent and the clients. I made a list, a short list of about 10 people, the head of our tech sector M&A team, our top quantitative analyst, the lead on our European desk. These were the rainmakers, the people who generated the vast majority of the firm's real profit. Like Maria, many of them were people I had hired, mentored, or championed. Their loyalty was personal. I also listed our top 5 clients. These were the institutions that had been with the firm for decades. Their relationships forged by my father, and maintained by me. They didn't do business with Sterling Cormac, the faceless entity. They did business with Arthur Vance. And now they did business with Julian Vance. A subtle but critical distinction. I didn't contact them yet. That would be the final phase. For now the plan was complete. It was a multi-pronged attack. A quiet coup, designed to unfold in the silent, invisible world of high finance. Marcus and Lawrence thought they were in a boardroom negotiation. They had no idea I was preparing for war. They thought they were holding all the cards, relying on the old world power of position and legacy. They didn't understand that in the modern world, true power doesn't come from your title. It comes from information, from strategy, and from the loyalty of competent people. Competence isn't cheap, until you lose it. And they were about to find out just how expensive that loss could be. The time for planning was over. It was time to make the first move. The beauty of the plan was its silence. Marcus and Lawrence were expecting a confrontation, a negotiation, a debate in the boardroom. They were prepared for a frontal assault, so I gave them nothing. I went back to work the following Monday and did my job. I sat in meetings. I answered emails. I reviewed pitch decks. I played the part of the dutiful son, the cowed executive who had accepted his fate. My apparent compliance made them relax. I could see it in Marcus's smug posture and in the way Lawrence stopped sweating quite so profusely whenever I was in the room. They thought they had won. They thought the pressure had worked and I had fallen in line. Their arrogance was my camouflage. While they were basking in their perceived victory, I was setting the board. My first move was a single, carefully worded email. It wasn't to a regulator or a journalist. It was to the personal office of Sheikh Al-Thani's chief strategist in London, a man I had met once at a conference years ago. The subject line was simple, a matter of mutual interest regarding Sterling Cormac. The body of the email was even simpler. It didn't mention fraud or toxic assets. It spoke of a unique and time-sensitive opportunity for a strategic acquisition of a portfolio of high-performing clean financial assets currently undervalued due to internal structural inefficiencies. It mentioned a pre-packaged restructuring plan that would guarantee a significant return on investment within 18 months. And I signed it not with my corporate title, but with my name, Julian Vance. The bait was in the water. The Vance name which they saw as their shield was now my spear. It was a name the Al-Thani Fund would recognize, a name synonymous with the very stability they were seeking. But the proposal itself was that of a revolutionary, not an incumbent. It was an irresistible combination, old-world credibility married to a modern aggressive strategy. 3 days passed. To Marcus and Lawrence, it was business as usual. To me it was the loudest silence of my life. Every buzz of my phone made my heart leap. Maria was my lifeline. She sent me short, coded messages. T&R initiated a new round of talks with a hedge fund, desperate for bridge financing. The quarterly audit is being fast-tracked. They're trying to get it signed off before the new international transparency laws kick in next month. They were scrambling, trying to put a new roof on a house with a rotten foundation. Then on Thursday afternoon, I got the reply. It wasn't an email. It was a call from a London number. A crisp British-accented voice introduced himself as the Sheikh's chief of staff. Mr. Vance, your email was intriguing. We have a team landing in New York tomorrow. They can meet you at a location of your choosing. We will require absolute discretion. I chose a neutral location, a private suite at a hotel near the airport, booked under David Chen's name. I took the rest of the day off, citing a sudden migraine. The meeting lasted 4 hours. I walked their team, 3 of the sharpest financial minds I had ever encountered, through my sterling 2.0 inches proposal. I laid out the whole ugly truth of Project Chimera, but I framed it not as a problem, but as the source of the opportunity. The existence of the toxic asset, and the partner's desperation to hide it, was precisely why a prime portfolio of assets was now available for a fraction of its true worth. I showed them Maria's data on the partner's personal looting, proving that the firm's leadership was a liability to be discarded, not an asset to be retained. I presented them with my list of key personnel, the rainmakers who were loyal to me, and the major client accounts that would follow me. I wasn't just offering them a company. I was offering them a fully functional, profitable, and staffed investment bank, ready to operate from day one, minus the debt and the corrupt management. It was a corporate decapitation strike. They listened, their faces impassive. They drilled me with questions for hours, testing every assumption, every number. They tried to break the model, but it was sound. I had built it to be. At the end of the meeting, the lead strategist, a stern woman named Zara, closed her laptop. She looked me in the eye and said, "We will conduct our own verification. If what you say is true, you will hear from us within a week with a formal letter of intent." This meeting never happened. The next week was a masterclass in psychological warfare. While the Al-Thani Fund's secret forensic team was dissecting my data, I continued my charade at the office. I even sat in on a planning session with Marcus and Lawrence for the capital-raising roadshow they still thought I was going to lead. I offered suggestions. I fine-tuned their pitch. I was helping them polish the brass on the Titanic. Their relief was palpable. They were so blinded by their own cleverness that they couldn't see the iceberg dead ahead. The panic started on a Tuesday. It started subtly. Lawrence came into my office, his face pale. The Al-Thani Fund just canceled a meeting with Marcus. No reason given. Just canceled. I feigned mild disappointment. That's a blow. Their capital would have been a huge vote of confidence. They won't even take our calls, Lawrence muttered, pacing my office. It's like we've become ghosts. That was the first sign. The fund was verifying my story, and the first step was to ice out the current management. They were confirming that the firm's value was not tied to Marcus and Lawrence. Maria fed me updates from the trenches. The atmosphere on the executive floor was turning from smug confidence to quiet paranoia. Whispers started. Why were external auditors making discreet inquiries about old off-balance sheet vehicles? Why was the head of the European desk suddenly being non-committal about his revenue projections for the next quarter? The real bomb dropped on Friday. A short, brutal press release appeared on the financial newswires. Sterling Cormac's largest institutional client, the North American Teachers' Pension Fund, announces a full review of its relationship with the firm, citing concerns over long-term structural stability. The North American Teachers' Pension Fund was one of my clients. The head of the fund was a man named Bill, who I played golf with twice a year. I hadn't asked him to do it. But during a chance encounter I'd orchestrated at our club the previous weekend, I had advised him, as a friend, that it might be a prudent time to publicly re-evaluate his portfolio's exposure, without giving him any specifics. It was a warning shot, and he was smart enough to heed it. The news hit the market like a stone. Sterling Cormac's stock, which was already fragile, dropped 12% in an hour. The phones on the trading floor lit up. Lenders were getting nervous. The bridge financing Marcus and Lawrence had been negotiating evaporated instantly. The panic was no longer quiet. It was a palpable, living thing in the building. I was in my office, watching the chaos unfold on my screen, when Marcus stormed in. He didn't bother to knock. His face was a mask of fury. "What did you do?" he hissed, slamming the door behind him. "I'm not sure what you mean, Marcus," I said, leaning back in my chair, keeping my voice level. "Don't play games with me, Julian. The Teachers' Pension Fund. That's your client. This is your doing. You're trying to sabotage us. You're trying to sink the firm to get back at us." "Sink the firm?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought the firm was being sunk by a 9-figure hole in the balance sheet. A hole you asked me to help you lie about." His face went white. He realized his mistake. He had just admitted the very thing he was trying to conceal, in his rage. He took a step back, his eyes darting around my office as if looking for a hidden microphone. He was cornered, and his predatory instincts were turning into the thrashing of a trapped animal. "You will not win," he snarled. "I will destroy you. I will drag the Vance name through so much mud, it will never be clean again. I will tell the world your sainted father was a fraud." "Go ahead," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Tell them. But when you do, they won't be listening to you. They'll be listening to me. And I'll have the documents, the models, and the solution. You just have the crime." He stood there, panting slightly, his expensive suit suddenly looking too big for him. The master of the universe, the man who commanded boardrooms with a flick of his wrist, was unraveling before my eyes. He had no more moves. He had been so focused on the ghost of my father that he never saw the sun standing right in front of him. He turned and left, not slamming the door this time, but pulling it shut with a quiet, defeated click. The silent takeover was complete. The king was dead. He just didn't know it yet. The public statement from the pension fund was the first tremor of the earthquake. The real seismic shift began the following Monday. It started with an email that landed in my inbox at 8:01 a.m. It was from Sarah Jenkins, the head of our technology M&A division, one of the people on my secret list. Her official resignation. It was polite, professional, and utterly devastating to the firm. Sarah's team was responsible for nearly 20% of the firm's annual revenue. Her departure wasn't just a loss of talent, it was a catastrophic loss of income. An hour later, another email. This time from the lead quantitative analyst in our risk management group, then another from the head of the European desk. It was a cascade, a coordinated, yet unspoken, talent exodus. I hadn't instructed them to quit. I had simply sent each of them a one-line message over the weekend from a private account. Change is coming. Your value is understood. Make the best decision for yourself. They knew what it meant. They knew that the ship was taking on water, and that I was building the lifeboat. They were choosing competence over chaos. They were choosing me. The impact on the firm was immediate and brutal. With its top earners walking out the door, the already shaky confidence of our lenders and investors collapsed completely. The stock plunged another 30% by noon. Maria was feeding me real-time updates from the war room, which was what the main conference room had become. Marcus and Lawrence were in a state of frantic, impotent rage. They were yelling at their lawyers, yelling at their remaining VPs, yelling at each other. They were hemorrhaging talent and capital, and they had no idea how to stop the bleeding. Because the wound wasn't external, it was a self-inflicted shot to the heart. They had always believed that people were interchangeable, that talent was a commodity. A thematic trigger I'd heard my whole life, but now saw in action. Competence isn't cheap, until you lose it. The cost was proving to be astronomical. Around 2 p.m., my private line rang. It was Marcus. His voice was completely different. The rage was gone, replaced by a strained, desperate cordiality. It was the voice of a man dangling from a cliff edge, trying to persuade you to offer him a hand. Julian, he began, the name sounding foreign in his mouth without the usual sneer. We need to talk. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot last week. There's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Marcus, I replied calmly. I understand the situation perfectly. It seems the market is starting to, as well. Listen, he said, ignoring my jab. We can fix this. We can fix all of it. Lawrence and I, we've been talking. We've been blind. We've been relying on the old ways. And you have the vision. The firm needs a Vance at the helm. Truly, at the helm. We're prepared to offer you the CEO position. Effective immediately. You can name your price. We'll even form a special committee, with you as chairman, to do commission Project Chimera. We can unwind it together. Properly. It was the ultimate gambit. The desperate counter-manipulation. They were offering me the crown to the kingdom they had just finished burning to the ground. They were offering me the very thing my father had been denied, the power to fix his own mistake. It was tempting. For a fleeting second, the thought of taking their offer, of becoming CEO of Sterling Cormac and saving it from within, was a powerful lure. It would be a story of redemption. But I saw the trap. They weren't offering me power. They were offering me culpability. If I took the deal, the moment I sat in that chair, their crisis would become my crisis. The failure would be pinned on me. When the firm inevitably collapsed under the weight of the lie, they would be long gone with their looted millions, and the headlines would read, Julian Vance, son of legend, fails to save father's firm. They weren't offering me a throne, they were offering me a scapegoat's cross. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting him sweat. Then I said, thank you for the offer, Marcus, but I'm not interested in being the captain of a sinking ship, especially one you scuttled yourself. What do you want, Julian? He asked, his voice cracking, all pretense of control gone. Money? Revenge? I want to restore the foundation, I said, and you're not part of it. I hung up. The power shift was complete. They had tried to corner me with my father's legacy, and I had turned it against them. They had tried to manipulate me with threats, and I had met them with strategy. Now they were trying to buy me with the very power they had abused, and I had refused. They had no cards left to play. All that remained was the final formal act of vindication. The checkmate was on the board. I just had to make the move. The next morning, an official, notarized letter of intent from the Al Thani Sovereign Wealth Fund was delivered by courier to the personal office of every single member of Sterling Cormac's board of directors. It was a work of art, drafted by the fund's ruthless legal team with input from David Chen and myself. It laid out a simple, brutal offer. The fund would acquire all of Sterling Cormac's performing assets, client lists, and assume its viable operational liabilities for a price that was frankly a fire sale. It was a lowball offer, but it was also the only offer on the table that would prevent a complete chaotic bankruptcy. But the offer came with conditions. Ironclad, non-negotiable conditions. The first was the immediate termination and resignation of Marcus Thorne and Lawrence Reed, with all severance and golden parachute clauses nullified due to gross fiduciary negligence. The legal documentation for this negligence, citing their use of Project Chimera for personal enrichment, was attached as a thick, damning appendix. The second condition was the legal partitioning of SC Bahari. The toxic asset and all its associated liabilities would be left behind in the hollowed-out shell of the old corporate structure, which would be allowed to proceed into an orderly bankruptcy. The third condition was that the new surviving entity would be restructured as a private subsidiary of the fund, to be named Vance Capital Partners, with Julian Vance appointed as its inaugural president and CEO. It was a kill shot. The board was trapped. They could either reject the offer and go down with the ship, facing years of shareholder lawsuits and regulatory investigations for their lack of oversight, or they could accept it, save themselves, and throw Marcus and Lawrence to the wolves. It wasn't a choice at all. An emergency board meeting was called for that afternoon. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. Maria was my eyes and ears, sending me text updates from her desk just outside the boardroom. They're shouting. Marcus is threatening to sue everyone. Lawrence is just sitting there, staring at the table. They've brought in the general counsel. He looks terrified. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was the chairman of the board, a man named Henderson, who had always prided himself on his pragmatism. His voice was weary. Julian, the board has voted to accept the Al Thani offer. Your terms have been met. Marcus and Lawrence have tendered their resignations, effective immediately. They are clearing out their desks as we speak. He paused, and I heard him sigh. I'm calling to formally offer you the position of president and CEO of the new entity. Congratulations, I suppose. I accept, I said simply. One more thing. Henderson said. The portrait of your father. What should we do with it? The question hung in the air. That portrait, the symbol of the entire conflict, the silent witness to the firm's glory and its shame. Have it carefully crated, I said, and delivered to my new office. I'll take it from here. I walked back into the offices of Sterling Cormac the next day. It was the same building, the same floor, but the air was completely different. The oppressive cloud of fear and decay had lifted. There was a sense of quiet, nervous energy, of a fever having broken. People looked at me as I walked through the halls, a mixture of awe, relief, and a little bit of fear in their eyes. I was no longer just Julian Vance, the son. I was the man who had torn down the old temple and was now in charge of building the new one. My final confrontation wasn't a confrontation at all. I was heading to my old office to pack my personal effects when I saw them. Marcus and Lawrence, standing by the elevator bank with a few cardboard boxes at their feet. They looked diminished, stripped of their titles, their power, and the aura of invincibility they had always worn like a suit of armor. They were just two old, defeated men. Marcus's silver hair was unkempt. His expensive suit rumpled. Lawrence's face was ashen. They saw me, and for a moment, Marcus's eyes flashed with the old hatred. But it died just as quickly, replaced by a profound, hollow emptiness. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. What was there to say? I hadn't beaten them in a screaming match or a public feud. I had beaten them with a spreadsheet. I had beaten them with logic. I had deconstructed their power base piece by piece until there was nothing left. I just nodded at them. A simple, final acknowledgement. Then I walked past them, toward the boardroom. I stood in the doorway and looked at the empty space on the wall where my father's portrait had hung for 3 decades. The wall was faded, a perfect rectangle of lighter paint marking the spot where the legend had resided. But the legend wasn't in the paint or the canvas. It was in the choices we make. They thought my father's legacy was a lie to be hidden. I knew his real legacy was the firm itself, the people in it, the trust it was built on. A legacy that had been tarnished, but not destroyed. I looked at the empty wall, and then at the bustling office beyond. The new workplace reality was taking shape. We had a lot of work to do, a lot of rebuilding. But for the first time in a very long time, the foundation was pure. My vindication wasn't in their defeat. It was in this new beginning. It was in the quiet hum of an honest enterprise. My legacy wasn't about erasing my father's mistake. It was about honoring his original intent. And that work was just getting started. So here I am, in my new office. It's smaller than the palatial suite Marcus occupied, but the view is better. I'm not looking down on the city. I'm looking out at it, as a part of it. The crate with my father's portrait arrived this morning. For a while I just left it sealed. I wasn't sure where to put it. Hanging it in the new boardroom felt wrong, like I was just starting the cycle all over again, creating a new myth for people to live under. Hanging it in my own office felt too personal, a constant reminder of the weight of the past. In the end, I had it hung in the main reception area, right where our clients and new employees will see it first. But I added a new small brass plaque beneath the original one. The original plaque just said Arthur Vance, founder. The new one reads, "Legacy is the foundation you build for others." It's a reminder, to me and to everyone who walks through these doors, of what truly matters. It's not about the name on the wall. It's about the integrity of the structure. My father made a mistake. A colossal one. Born out of a desperate desire to protect his people, he created a lie that festered for 30 years. Marcus and Lawrence, in their greed, tried to make that lie his only legacy. They tried to use my name, my history, and my sense of duty to perpetuate it. They thought they had me trapped by the past. But they made a critical error. They underestimated me. They saw the sun, but they didn't see the man. They saw the name, but they didn't see the character that I had built for myself. Brick by brick, deal by deal. In the shadow of that great name, they believed legacy was something to be inherited. A mantle you just put on. But that's not right. A legacy isn't a gift. It's a responsibility. It's a conversation between the past and the future, and you are the one speaking in the present. You get to decide which parts of the past you honor, which parts you correct, and which parts you build upon. They wanted me to be a curator of a museum exhibit. I chose to be an architect of a living building. This whole experience taught me a powerful lesson. The world is full of people like Marcus and Lawrence. People who will use your loyalty, your history, and your sense of honor against you. They will try to convince you that their survival is your duty. They will wrap their own selfish needs in the flag of tradition and legacy. They will tell you that the only choice is to fall in line. But there is always another choice. It's almost always the harder choice. It requires you to stand alone, to risk everything, and to have faith in your own moral compass, even when the whole world is telling you to ignore it. My father's true legacy isn't the lie he told. It's the integrity he inspired in me. The integrity that ultimately gave me the strength to undo that lie. And my legacy. It's Vance Capital Partners. It's the team I've assembled, the talented people who chose to follow a principle, not just a paycheck. It's the trust we are rebuilding, client by client, with transparency and honesty. It's proving, every single day, that you can be successful without selling your soul. So I ask you, what would you have done? Would you have taken the deal? Would you have become CEO and tried to fix it from the inside? Or would you have blown the whole thing up and let the chips fall where they may? There are no easy answers when you're caught between loyalty and truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt undervalued or been asked to compromise your principles for someone else's gain, hit that like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories matter, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more accounts of when the system gets a much-needed correction. Your support helps us share these important narratives. Remember, your career is what you do, but your legacy is who you are. Don't ever let anyone else define that for you.